We think about money all the time. We work for it, we spend it, we try to save it. But what if the story you learned in school about where money even comes from is just plain wrong? So that's what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to poke some serious holes in that old story. We're going to peel back the layers and discover that the real history of money isn't about trading seashells. It's actually a much more fascinating story of debt, power, and, social relationships. All right, so first up, let's talk about the story we all know. I mean, this is the one they drill into you in Econ 101. It's this neat, clean, logical story. Or so it seems. Right. So the story goes something like this. Way back when, everyone was on their own, totally self-sufficient. Then we figured out, hey, I'm good at making bread, you're good at raising chickens, let's trade. But that led to this big problem of barter, right? What if I have wheat and you have chickens, but I'm a vegetarian? That's the whole double coincidence of wants issue. The textbook says this inefficiency forced us to find some common item, salt maybe, or shiny shells, to use as money. And from there, it was a super easy jump to coins, paper bills, and the digital money we use today. And this idea is deeply rooted in how we're taught economics. I mean, just look at this quote from Paul Samuelson's textbook, which is one of the most famous econ books ever. He lists all these things that supposedly served as money: tobacco, furs, even slaves or wives. The idea is that anything could become money if it was just convenient enough for trading. It's a great story, right? Super tidy, makes a lot of sense. But here's the catch. It's just not true. When actual historians and anthropologists went looking for this age of barter, this society where everyone was just trading stuff directly, they couldn't find it anywhere. It just didn't exist. So that begs the question, right? If there was no great age of barter, then what was going on? What did exchange look like in early human societies? And this, my friends, is where that whole textbook story just completely falls apart. Okay, so what the anthropologists found pretty much turns the old story on its head. In these tribal societies, exchange wasn't about making a profit at all. It was about building relationships, strengthening social ties, making peace, making sure the whole community survived. It was more like gift giving, a system of reciprocity. Nobody was haggling over the price of a spear. And all that stuff that economists pointed to as primitive money, the shells, the special stones, turns out that's not what they were. Anthropologists call them primitive valuables, and you couldn't just go buy dinner with them. No way. These things were reserved for really important, high-stakes social events. Think arranging a marriage or settling a blood feud. They were a part of the social fabric, not the corner market. So this really brings us to a huge fork in the road. We've got two totally different ways of looking at what money is. The old school, orthodox view says money is a thing. It's a piece of technology we invented to make barter easier. But the evidence, the heterodox view, points to something completely different. It says money isn't a thing at all. It's a social institution. It's basically a giant accounting system for keeping track of debts and promises between people. Okay, so if money wasn't invented to solve the barter problem, where did it come from? Well, the real story starts not with trading goods, but with a major shift in society that created a totally new kind of problem: insecurity. Think about it. In a tight-knit tribal community, the group has your back. You're taken care of. But once the idea of private property takes hold, everything changes. Suddenly, you and your family are on your own. What happens if your crops fail or your hunt is unsuccessful? This creates what some thinkers call existential uncertainty, this deep-seated fear about survival that just wasn't there in the same way before. And that insecurity is what leads us to the true origin of money. Here's how it likely went down. First, that uncertainty forces people to borrow from their neighbors just to get by. These loans, they're basically promises to pay back later, a forward contract. But how do you measure that debt? How much wheat do I owe you next year? You need a standard, an abstract way to measure it. That standard, that unit of account, is money. It's the idea of the measurement that comes first. And this isn't some fringe idea. The great economist John Maynard Keynes said it himself. Money as a unit of account is born from debt. The IOU comes first. Then we create a system to measure that IOU. The physical coins and bills that we carry around, they come way, way later. They're just tokens, physical representations of that underlying debt. All right, but hold on, an abstract measurement system is one thing. How does that turn into a currency that everybody wants, that everybody uses for everything? Well, that's where the second absolutely crucial piece of the puzzle comes in: the power of the state. This powerful explanation is known as the state theory of money, or you might hear it called chartalism. And the core idea here is that a currency's value doesn't come from being backed by gold or some other commodity. Nope, it comes directly from the authority of the government that issues it. And the way this works is actually pretty simple, but it is incredibly powerful. Step 1. The state, the king, the government, whatever, imposes an obligation on you. Let's call it a tax. Then, and this is the key part, the state says you can only pay this tax using this special token that I create. All of a sudden, everybody in the kingdom, whether you're a farmer or a blacksmith, has to get their hands on that specific thing, that currency, to pay the taxman. And just like that, the state creates a massive, widespread demand for its money. This quote from A. Mitchell Innes just nails it. He says it's the tax that gives the money its value. A dollar is a dollar because there's a dollar of tax you have to pay with it. So in this view, taxes aren't just about funding the government's spending. They're the very thing that drives the currency and gives it value in the first place. A total mind-bender, right? So let's bring this all into the modern world. If money is fundamentally debt and its value is driven by the state, what does our financial system actually look like today? Well, it's not a flat marketplace. It's structured like a pyramid, a hierarchy of IOUs. Yeah, you can really think of our entire financial system as this giant pyramid of promises to pay. So at the very bottom, you've got your IOUs and my IOUs. Think credit card debt or a corporate bond. A step above that, you have commercial bank liabilities. The money in your checking account, that's just the bank's IOU to you. It's their promise to pay you. And then at the very top, the apex of the whole pyramid, you have the state's IOU. That's the physical cash and the digital reserves that are issued by the central bank. This is the ultimate money that's used to settle all the other debts in the system. And having the central bank at the top is absolutely critical. See, unlike a rigid system like the gold standard, where there's only a fixed amount of gold to go around, the central bank can create its IOUs, those reserves, whenever they're needed. This gives the system an elastic quality. It allows the central bank to step in during a financial crisis and provide the liquidity to keep the whole pyramid of promises from collapsing in on itself. So let's step back for a second. We've thrown out the old barter myth and replaced it with a new story, one built around debt and the power of the state. But so what? Why does this even matter? Well, because this new perspective completely changes how you see the world and our economy. So let's just quickly recap the big ideas here. First, money isn't a thing, it's a social system. It's a network of credit and debt. Second, taxes do more than just pay for government services. They are the engine that drives the value of our currency. Once you understand that, it totally changes how you think about big issues like national debt, what banks really do, and even what value itself means. And that really leaves us with one final, pretty profound question to chew on. If money isn't some physical thing backed by gold, but is ultimately just a web of social promises, a system built on trust, what actually holds it all together? And, maybe more importantly, what happens when we stop believing in those promises?